Rain pounded against the roof of Olivia Wright's ranger station, the sound almost drowning out the emergency radio, crackling with static. Outside, the storm raged through Evergreen Valley, turning the hiking trails of Cascade National Park into treacherous mudslides. Lightning illuminated the darkening sky as thunder rolled across the mountains. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Olivia checked her equipment one last time. First aid kit, emergency blanket, flashlight, radio. At 28, she'd been the lead ranger in this remote section of the park for 3 years. The locals called her the Forest Guardian, a title she neither encouraged nor discouraged. This wasn't a job to her. It was a calling. "This is Ranger Wright heading out to check the eastern trails," she spoke into her radio. "Storm damage reported near Falcon Ridge. Copy that, Ranger Wright. Be careful out there." The voice of her colleague Jake crackled through the speaker. Olivia pulled the hood of her weatherproof jacket over her auburn hair and stepped into the downpour. Her truck handled the muddy service road with practiced ease as she navigated through sheets of rain. Most rangers would have waited until morning, but Olivia had received reports of hikers still on the trail when the storm hit. The eastern trails were deserted when she arrived. Olivia grabbed her pack and flashlight, setting out on foot where the trail became too narrow for vehicles. She'd hiked nearly 2 miles when a flash of color caught her eye, something unnatural among the greens and browns of the forest floor. Olivia turned her flashlight toward it, revealing a dark blue backpack, half buried in mud beside the trail. "Hello!" she called out, her voice barely carrying over the wind. "Park Ranger, is anyone there?" The only response was the continued patter of rain on leaves. Olivia moved carefully down the slope, her trained eyes scanning for signs of the backpack's owner. A faint groan carried on the wind, so quiet she almost missed it. Olivia froze, listening intently. "Hello? Can you hear me?" Another groan, slightly louder. Following the sound, Olivia pushed through a dense thicket of ferns and found him, a man lying half-conscious at the base of a rocky outcrop, his leg twisted at an unnatural angle beneath. Him, blood mixed with rain on his face from a gash across his forehead. "Sir, can you hear me?" Olivia knelt beside him, quickly assessing his injuries. The man's eyes fluttered open briefly, revealing pain-clouded blue irises before closing again. His clothing was high-quality hiking gear, but completely inappropriate for the current conditions. Lightweight pants and a thin jacket that offered no protection against the storm. No wonder hypothermia was setting in. Olivia checked his pulse. Weak, but steady. The broken leg was her biggest concern, along with potential head trauma and the rapidly dropping temperature. Night was falling, and a helicopter evacuation would be impossible in this weather. "Hey, stay with me," she urged, unfolding the emergency blanket to wrap around his shivering form. "What's your name?" The man's eyes opened again, confusion evident in his gaze. "Nathan," he managed to whisper before wincing in pain. "Nathan Gray." "Okay, Nathan, I'm Olivia Wright, park ranger. You've got a broken leg and possibly a concussion. I need to get you somewhere warm and dry." Nathan nodded weakly, then passed out again. With practiced efficiency, Olivia fashioned a makeshift splint for his leg using branches and strips torn from the emergency blanket. Then, using all her strength, honed from years of wilderness rescues, she managed to lift him into a fireman's carry. The trek back to her truck was excruciating. Every step on the slippery trail threatened to send them both tumbling down the mountainside. Rain lashed against her face as the wind picked up. Olivia's muscles screamed in protest, but she pressed forward, one careful step at a time. By the time she reached her vehicle, Olivia was exhausted, soaked through despite her waterproof gear. With great care, she loaded Nathan into the passenger seat, securing him as best she could before climbing behind the wheel. The ranger station was too far, but her cabin was just 15 minutes away, nestled in a clearing at the edge of the park. Olivia made the decision instantly. This man needed immediate shelter and care. She radioed Jake with a brief update as she navigated the treacherous roads. Found an injured hiker, male, approximately 35, broken leg and possible concussion. Whether too severe for medevac, taking him to my cabin for emergency treatment. Copy that, Olivia. Need backup? She glanced at the unconscious man beside her. Something told her this was no ordinary hiker, despite his current state. His backpack contained high-end gear, and even soaked and injured, there was a certain presence. About him. Negative. Will call if situation changes. Right out. Lightning flashed across the sky as Olivia's truck pulled up to her small log cabin. The structure wasn't much. Just 2 bedrooms, a living area with a stone fireplace and a basic kitchen. But it was warm, dry, and well stocked with medical supplies. With renewed determination, Olivia half-carried, half-dragged Nathan inside, laying him gently on the couch near the fireplace. Working quickly, she built a fire, filling the cabin with warm, flickering light. Then she turned her full attention to her patient. His clothes were soaked through. Hypothermia was a serious concern. Professional detachment took over as she carefully removed his wet garments, wrapping him in dry blankets before properly splinting his leg. The head wound needed cleaning and stitches. Thankfully, her wilderness medicine certification had prepared her for exactly this scenario. As she worked, Olivia noticed details about this mysterious Nathan Gray. His hands showed no signs of calluses or rough work. His watch, still somehow functioning despite the soaking, was a model she recognized from a magazine, worth more than 3 months of her ranger salary. Who was this man? And what had he been doing alone on a mountain trail during a storm warning? Olivia pushed the questions aside. It didn't matter who he was. Out here, status meant nothing against the indifferent power of nature. Rich or poor, prepared or foolish, the mountain treated everyone the same. Hours later, with Nathan stabilized and sleeping, Olivia finally allowed herself to sink into the armchair opposite the couch. The fire cast dancing shadows across the cabin's wooden walls as the storm continued its assault outside. Tomorrow, she would figure out how to get proper medical help if the weather cleared. For now, she watched the steady rise and fall of her patient's chest, unaware that the man she had saved was Nathan Gray, founder of Grayscale Technologies and one of the wealthiest tech entrepreneurs in the country, a man whose presence on her mountain was no accident and whose life she had just irrevocably changed by saving his. Outside, the storm began to ease, but a different kind of tempest was brewing, one that would sweep Olivia Wright into a world she never imagined entering, challenging everything she thought she knew about wealth, power, and the true meaning of value. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Morning light filtered through the cabin windows, casting a golden glow across the wooden floor. Olivia had slept fitfully in the armchair, waking every hour to check on her patient. The fire had burned down to embers, but the cabin remained comfortably warm. She stretched, feeling the stiffness in her muscles from the rescue and the night spent in the chair. A soft groan from the couch drew her attention immediately. Nathan Gray was awake, his blue eyes now clear and alert as they swept across the unfamiliar surroundings before settling on her. "Where am I?" His voice was deeper than she expected, with a clarity that suggested the confusion of last night had passed. "My cabin," Olivia replied, moving to his side. "About 3 miles from where I found you. How's the pain?" Nathan attempted to shift position and winced. Substantial. Olivia reached for her medical kit and retrieved some pain relievers. "These should help. You're lucky to be alive, Mr. Gray. Another few hours in that storm and we wouldn't be having this conversation. He accepted the medication with a nod of thanks, studying her as he swallowed the pills with water. You're the ranger. Olivia, right? That's right. Olivia Wright. Thank you for saving my life. There was a sincerity in his voice that caught her off guard. In her experience, most people she rescued were either embarrassed or defensive about their predicament. Nathan seemed neither, just genuinely grateful. Just doing my job, she replied, checking his splint. Your leg is broken, but it's a clean break. I've radioed for medical evacuation, but it might be a few hours. The storm did some damage to the access roads. Nathan nodded, his gaze still fixed on her with an intensity that made her slightly uncomfortable. It wasn't threatening, just unusually focused, as if he were cataloguing every detail. You don't look like most park rangers I've met, he said. Finally, Olivia raised an eyebrow. And you don't look like most hikers who get themselves lost on my mountain. What were you doing out there during a storm warning anyway? Something flashed across his face, hesitation perhaps, before he answered. I needed to clear my head. The storm came faster than I expected. It wasn't the whole truth. Olivia had worked with enough lost hikers to recognize when someone was holding back, but she didn't press him. Everyone was entitled to their secrets, as long as they weren't putting others at risk. You're lucky I was checking the trails, she said, moving to the kitchen area to prepare coffee. Most rangers would have waited until morning. But not the forest guardian, Nathan replied. Olivia turned sharply. How do you know that name? You were talking to your colleague on the radio. I heard him call you that before I passed out again. Right. Olivia relaxed slightly. It's just a silly nickname the locals gave me. I don't think it's silly, Nathan said, his expression serious. It suits you. Olivia felt a strange warmth creep up her neck and busied herself with the coffee maker. There was something disarming about this man, a charisma that seemed effortless, even while he lay injured on her couch. You're not from around here, she stated rather than asked. No, Seattle originally, but I travel a lot for work. What kind of work has you hiking alone on remote mountain trails? Nathan hesitated again. Technology. I consult for various companies. It was such an obvious understatement that Olivia almost laughed. His watch alone suggested he did a lot more than consult, but she let it pass. Whatever game he was playing, she wasn't particularly interested in joining. Well, Mr. Technology Consultant, your gear was high-end but completely wrong for these conditions. If you're going to hike these mountains, you need proper equipment and preferably a guide. Nathan smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face. I'll remember that for next time. And please call me Nathan. Their conversation was interrupted by the crackle of the radio. Jake's voice came through, reporting that the medical evacuation team would arrive within the hour. The roads had been cleared enough for an ambulance to get through to the nearest access point. Copy that, Olivia responded. Patient is stable, conscious and oriented. When she turned back to Nathan, his expression had changed. He seemed almost disappointed by the news. Sounds like you'll be rid of me soon, he said lightly. That's the plan, Olivia replied with a small smile, handing him a cup of coffee. Though I have to admit, as far as rescue patients go, you're less trouble than most. They sat in surprisingly comfortable silence for a few minutes, sipping coffee as morning light strengthened outside the windows. The storm had cleared completely, leaving behind a washed-clean sky and the fresh scent of rain-soaked earth that drifted in through the partially open window. This is nice, Nathan said quietly, looking around the cabin. Peaceful. Olivia followed his gaze. Her home was simple by most standards. Handmade furniture, bookshelves lined with field guides and worn paperbacks, a few photographs of spectacular mountain vistas she'd captured during her hikes. But there was a harmony to it that even she recognized was special. It suits me, she said. I can see why. There was something like longing in his voice. No phones constantly ringing, no meetings, no deadlines. Just bears, mountain lions, and the occasional lost hiker, Olivia added. Dryly, Nathan laughed, then winced as the movement jarred his injured leg. Fair point. As Olivia helped him sit up more comfortably, her hand brushed against a small leather wallet that had fallen from his jacket pocket, now dry and hanging near the fire. The wallet flipped open, revealing an ID card. Olivia caught only a glimpse, but it was enough to see the Grayscale Technologies logo and the title Founder and CEO. She froze, the pieces suddenly clicking into place. Not just some wealthy hiker. Nathan Gray was the Nathan Gray, the tech prodigy who had built one of the most innovative companies in the country. His face occasionally appeared in the news, feeds that reached even her remote cabin. Nathan noticed her expression change. Is something wrong? Olivia handed him the wallet wordlessly. He took it, understanding immediately what had happened. Ah, he said simply, closing the wallet and setting it aside. Now you know. Why didn't you say anything? Olivia asked, genuinely confused. Nathan looked at her directly, his blue eyes unwavering. Because for the first time in years, someone was treating me like a normal person, not a walking bank account or a business opportunity. Olivia wasn't sure how to respond. She'd rescued a billionaire, one of the most powerful men in the tech industry, and she'd been lecturing him about proper hiking gear. Well, she said finally, being a billionaire doesn't make your leg any less broken or your hiking decisions any less questionable. Nathan's face broke into a genuine smile, relief evident in his expression. Exactly. And that's refreshing. The sound of an approaching vehicle interrupted them. Through the window, Olivia could see an ambulance making its way up the narrow road to her cabin. Your chariot awaits, she said, standing up. Time to get you back to your world of technology and meetings. Nathan's smile faded slightly. Listen, Olivia, it's fine, she cut him off, suddenly uncomfortable with the direction this might be heading. Really? Just doing my job, remember? Let's get you to that ambulance. As she helped him prepare for transport, gathering his now dry belongings, Olivia maintained a professional distance. Whatever moment of connection they'd shared over coffee was gone, replaced by the reality of their vastly different worlds. The paramedics arrived, transferring Nathan to a stretcher with practiced efficiency. As they were about to load him into the ambulance, he reached out, catching Olivia's wrist. Thank you, he said quietly. Not just for saving my life, for seeing me. Before she could respond, the paramedics had wheeled him away, the ambulance doors closing on Nathan Gray and whatever complicated emotions his presence had stirred in her quiet life. Olivia stood in front of her cabin, watching as the ambulance disappeared down the mountain road. She told herself this was the end of it, an unusual rescue with an unusual patient, nothing more. Tomorrow she would return to her patrols, her quiet evenings with books by the fire, her simple, purposeful life. But as she turned to go back inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted, like the first tremor before an avalanche, small but significant, a warning of greater changes to come. 2 weeks passed. Olivia had almost convinced herself that the encounter with Nathan Gray was nothing more than an unusual anecdote in her ranger career. The spring weather had improved, bringing more hikers to the trails and keeping her busy with routine patrols, wildlife monitoring, and the occasional lost tourist who'd wandered off the marked paths. She was completing paperwork in the ranger station when Jake poked his head through the doorway, an odd expression on his face. Olivia, there's someone here. To see you. Something in his tone made her look up sharply. Who is it? Says his name is Nathan Gray. Jake lowered his voice. Showed up in a Range Rover that costs more than we make in 3 years. What did you do? Save a millionaire or something? Billionaire, actually, Olivia muttered, standing up and straightening her uniform. Where is he? Outside. Waiting by. Your truck? Olivia nodded, ignoring Jake's curious stare as she walked past him. She had no idea why Nathan Gray would return to Cascade National Park, especially to see her. Part of her had expected a thank you note, maybe even a donation to the park, the usual response when she rescued someone with means, but not a personal visit. Nathan stood beside her truck, looking remarkably different from the injured man she'd rescued. He wore casual but clearly expensive hiking clothes, proper ones this time, and leaned lightly on a walking stick, his injured leg now in a sleek medical boot rather than her makeshift splint. He turned as she approached, and the smile that spread across his face was genuine and warm. "Ranger Wright," he greeted her. "Or should I say, Forest Guardian?" "Mr. Gray," she replied, keeping her tone professional. "This is unexpected. How's the leg?" "Healing well, thanks to your quick action." He gestured to the boot. 6 more weeks of this, then physical therapy. The doctors were impressed with your field medicine skills, by the way. Said your splint was textbook perfect. "I'm certified in wilderness first response," she said with a small shrug. "Part of the job." An awkward silence fell between them. Nathan seemed to be searching for words, which surprised her. From what she'd read about him after their encounter, Nathan Gray was known for his eloquence and confidence in public speaking. "I wanted to thank you properly," he finally said, "for saving my life." "You already did," Olivia reminded him, "before the ambulance took you away." "Words in a moment of crisis don't count," Nathan insisted. "I was hoping you might let me buy you lunch. There's a diner in town, I believe, the Pinewood Cafe." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "You want to buy me lunch at Ellie's Greasy Spoon? Unless you'd prefer somewhere else. I have a helicopter on standby. We could be in Seattle in 40 minutes if you'd rather have lunch there." He was serious, she realized with astonishment. The casual mention of a helicopter on standby, as if it were a taxi, struck her as both absurd and strangely endearing. "The Pinewood is fine," she said, suppressing a smile, "but I only have an hour lunch break. Perfect, I'll drive." Before she could protest, Nathan was already moving toward his vehicle. With a sigh, Olivia followed, ignoring Jake's transparent attempt to look busy, while obviously eavesdropping from the station doorway. The ride to town was surprisingly comfortable. Nathan asked intelligent questions about the park, the local wildlife, and her work as a ranger. He listened attentively to her answers, seeming genuinely interested rather than just making polite conversation. For someone who ran a multi-billion-dollar technology empire, he had an impressive knowledge of conservation issues. The Pinewood Cafe was a local institution, a small, family-owned diner that had served the town for over 50 years. When they walked in, Olivia was acutely aware of the stares directed their way. In a town of fewer than 2,000 people, a stranger stood out, especially one who moved with Nathan's quiet confidence. Ellie, the 60-something owner, seated them at a corner booth with a raised eyebrow at Olivia that clearly demanded future explanation. The menu was simple fare: burgers, sandwiches, and Ellie's famous pie. "So," Olivia said after they ordered, "are you going to tell me what you were really doing on that mountain trail? And don't say, clearing your head. Nobody hikes that deep into Cascade during storm season just to think." Nathan's expression turned somber. He seemed to debate internally before answering. "I was looking for something," he admitted. Or someone, rather. Olivia waited, watching him carefully. "My father disappeared in these mountains 25 years ago," Nathan continued quietly. "He was an avid hiker and photographer. One day, he went out for a trail run and never came back. Search and rescue looked for 2 weeks before giving up." Olivia's professional interest was immediately piqued. "Which trail was he last seen on?" "Eagle's Pass. But the search extended to all the surrounding areas, including where you found me." "That's not a coincidence, is it?" Nathan shook his head. "I come back every year around the anniversary. Usually just for a day hike, but this time he hesitated. I found something. An old camera, half buried near a rockslide area. I think it might have been his. Olivia leaned forward. Did you report this to Park Services? Not yet. I wanted to confirm it first, but then the storm hit and he gestured to his leg. The camera got lost during my fall. I had it in my hand one moment, and then when I woke up in your cabin, it was gone. Pieces began falling into place in Olivia's mind. That's why you came back. You want to find the camera? Yes. Nathan met her gaze directly. And I was hoping you might help me. You know these mountains better than anyone. If you could take me back to where you found me. That area is still unstable after the storm, Olivia warned. And with your leg, I know it's a lot to ask, he interrupted. But this is important. It's the first real lead I've had in 25 years. The raw emotion in his voice caught her off guard. This wasn't the calculating tech CEO she'd read about in articles. This was a son still searching for answers about his father's disappearance. Okay, she found herself saying, I can't take you up there with that leg, but I can look for the camera myself. If I find anything, I'll let you know. Relief flooded Nathan's face. Thank you. I can't tell you what this means to me. Their food arrived, temporarily pausing the conversation. As they ate, Nathan steered the discussion to lighter topics, asking about her background and how she'd become a ranger. I grew up in Portland, Olivia explained. My parents were both doctors. Everyone expected me to follow in their footsteps, but I never felt at home in the city. Every summer my grandfather would take me camping in these mountains. When he died, he left me enough money to put myself through environmental science school. The ranger position opened up 3 years ago, and it felt right. And the cabin came with the job. Park service housing. It's not much, but it's perfect, Nathan finished for her. I meant what I said that morning. There's a piece there that's hard to find elsewhere. Olivia studied him curiously. Don't you live in some modern mansion overlooking Puget Sound? I imagine that's pretty peaceful. A shadow crossed Nathan's face. I have a house in Seattle, yes, but surrounded by security systems, staff, and the constant ping of devices. Peaceful isn't the word I'd use. There was a loneliness in his voice that resonated with something. Inside her, despite their vastly different lives, Olivia recognized a kindred spirit, someone who didn't quite fit into the world they were expected to inhabit. Must be tough, she said, without sarcasm, never knowing if people want to know, you or your money. Nathan's eyes widened slightly, surprised by her perception. That's exactly it. Everything is a transaction. Everyone wants something. Even relationships feel like business deals waiting to happen. Is that why you didn't tell me who you were right away? Afraid I'd ask for a donation to the Ranger Station Coffee Fund, he laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. You'd be the first person to ask for something so reasonable. Their conversation flowed easily through the rest of lunch, touching on everything from favorite books to debates about conservation policy. By the time they finished Ellie's blueberry pie, Olivia was reluctantly admitting to herself that she enjoyed Nathan's company. He was thoughtful, well-informed, and surprisingly down-to-earth for someone with his wealth and position. As they prepared to leave, Nathan handed her a small device. What's this? She asked, examining what looked like a sophisticated satellite phone. A direct line, he replied. In case you find anything, or just want to talk. It works anywhere, even without cell service. Olivia hesitated before accepting. I'll call if I find your father's camera. But don't expect regular updates on park wildlife. Wouldn't dream of it, Nathan said, though his smile suggested otherwise. They drove back to the ranger station in comfortable silence. When they arrived, Nathan handed her a sealed envelope. What's this? "A donation to the park," he explained, "for trail maintenance and search and rescue equipment. No strings attached." Olivia took the envelope cautiously. "Thank you. That's generous." "It's practical," Nathan corrected. "If the trails had been better maintained, I might not have fallen in the first place." As she stepped out of his vehicle, Nathan rolled down the window. "Olivia, be careful up there when you look for the camera. That mountain has already taken enough." She nodded, watching as he drove away, the expensive Range Rover looking distinctly out of place against the backdrop of towering pines and the modest ranger station. Only after he disappeared down the road did Olivia open the envelope. Inside was a check made out to Cascade National Park for $250,000. She stood frozen, staring at the amount. This wasn't just a thank you donation. This was life-changing funding for the chronically underfunded park. With this money, they could repair miles of damaged trails, update their emergency equipment, perhaps even hire additional seasonal staff. Clutching the envelope, Olivia felt that same sense of tremor she'd experienced when watching the ambulance drive away with Nathan. What had begun as a simple rescue was becoming something far more complicated, a connection to a man from a world utterly different from her own, and a mystery about his father that had drawn her in despite her best intentions. As she walked back into the ranger station, the satellite phone heavy in her pocket, Olivia knew that her quiet, orderly life had just become significantly more complex. 3 days later, Olivia hiked up the Eastern Trail alone, her backpack loaded with rescue equipment and her mind filled with conflicting thoughts. She told herself this expedition was purely professional, helping a park visitor locate a lost item, something she'd done countless times before. But the satellite phone in her pocket and the memory of Nathan's earnest expression suggested this was anything but routine. The weather had stabilized into the perfect spring day, with clear blue skies and a gentle breeze rustling through the pines. Birds called overhead, and the occasional rustle in the underbrush signaled small animals going about their business. On any other day, Olivia would have savored the tranquility, but today her focus was singular. She reached the rockslide area where she'd found Nathan 2 weeks prior. The terrain was challenging, loose shale scattered across a steep slope that fed into a narrow ravine. Standing at the top, Olivia studied the ground carefully, trying to reconstruct what might have happened. Nathan had been holding the camera when he fell. The impact would have likely caused him to lose his grip. Given the slope of the land and the direction of the recent rainfall, Olivia began a methodical search, starting from where she had found him and working outward in a spiral pattern. The technique was standard search procedure, but the object was far from standard. A camera that had potentially been exposed to the elements for 25 years would be difficult to spot, possibly unrecognizable. After an hour of careful examination, she was about to expand her search area when a glint of something caught her eye. Metal reflecting sunlight from beneath a jumble of rocks near the base of the ravine. Carefully navigating the unstable slope, Olivia made her way down. What she found wasn't what she expected. Rather than an old camera, she discovered a more recent model, weathered and damaged, but clearly the one Nathan had dropped during his fall. She carefully extracted it from the rocks, examining it for any remaining functionality. The casing was cracked, the lens shattered, but the memory card slot appeared intact. As she secured the camera in her pack, something else caught her attention. A small opening in the rock face, partially obscured by fallen debris. It wasn't a proper cave, more like a deep crevice, but it was large enough for a person to enter. Curious, Olivia switched on her flashlight and peered inside. The beam illuminated a narrow passage extending several feet into the mountainside before widening into what appeared to be a small chamber. Years of ranger training told her to proceed with caution. Caves in this region could be unstable, and wildlife often used them for shelter. "Hello?" she called, listening for any sounds of animal inhabitants. Only her echo answered. Decision. Made, Olivia carefully entered the crevice, ducking to avoid the low ceiling. The passage was tight but navigable, opening after about 10 feet into a space large enough to stand in. Her flashlight beam swept across the interior, revealing something that made her breath catch. Against the far wall sat a weathered backpack, partially collapsed with age. Beside it, a rusted tripod lay on its side, and scattered around were what appeared to be the remnants of a campsite. A severely degraded sleeping bag, the aluminum frame of a pack stove, and various other items, too deteriorated to immediately identify. Olivia approached slowly, her heart pounding. The pack bore the faded logo of a brand popular in the 1990s. Could this be? With careful hands, she examined the backpack, finding a waterproof inner compartment that had preserved some of its contents. Inside was a wallet containing a driver's license. Though discolored with age, the name was still legible. Thomas Gray, Nathan's father. A chill ran up Olivia's spine, despite the warmth of the day. She had just found what search and rescue teams had failed to locate 25 years ago. Further inspection revealed a weatherproof camera case wedged beneath the remains of the sleeping bag. Inside was an old 35mm camera, surprisingly well preserved. Thanks to the protective case, the film was still inside. Olivia sat back on her heels, processing what she'd discovered. Thomas Gray hadn't just disappeared on the trail. He had sought shelter in this hidden crevice, perhaps during a storm similar to the one that had nearly claimed his son decades later. What had happened afterward remained unclear, but the presence of all his equipment suggested he never walked out. The satellite phone suddenly felt even heavier in her pocket. This wasn't just finding a recently dropped camera. This was unearthing a long-buried family tragedy. How would Nathan react to the discovery that his father had likely died in this very spot, perhaps injured and unable to summon help, waiting for a rescue that never came? With reverence for what this discovery meant, Olivia carefully documented everything with her own camera before collecting the key items: the wallet, the old camera, and a waterproof notebook she found in another compartment of the backpack. The rest would need to be properly processed by park authorities and eventually the local police. Emerging from the crevice back into daylight, Olivia took a deep breath of fresh air, trying to clear her mind. Protocol dictated she should report this immediately to her supervisor and the county sheriff. This was, after all, potentially a recovery of human remains, though she hadn't found a body, but the personal connection, Nathan's decades-long search. Inferences weighed heavily on her. Didn't he deserve to know first, to see his father's belongings before they disappeared into evidence bags and case files? Before she could second-guess herself, Olivia pulled out the satellite phone and pressed the single button on its side. It connected almost instantly. "Olivia?" Nathan's voice came through with surprising clarity. "Did you find something?" She hesitated only briefly. "Yes, but not what you were looking for. I found more." "What do you mean?" The tension in his voice was palpable. "I think I found where your father was last, where he—" She couldn't bring herself to finish the sentence. "There's a hidden crevice in the rock face. His things are there, including an old camera in a case. The film's still inside." Silence hung on the line for several seconds. "Are you certain it's is?" Nathan finally asked, his voice carefully controlled. "His wallet is here, Thomas Gray, the ID photo. There's a resemblance to you." Another long silence. "Where are you exactly?" The calm in his voice had an edge of desperation. "Eastern Trail, about 4 miles in, near the rockslide area where I found you. Stay there, please." The composure in his tone was fracturing. "I'm on my way." "Nathan," Olivia said quickly, "you can't hike up here with your injured leg. It's too dangerous." "I'm not hiking," There was a new determination in his voice. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. The line went dead before she could respond. True to his word. Exactly 28 minutes later, Olivia heard the distinct sound of helicopter rotors echoing through the valley. She moved to a clearing where she could be seen, waving her bright orange ranger jacket as the sleek black helicopter approached. It hovered above the clearing. There wasn't enough space to land, and a figure was lowered by a harness system. Even from a distance, Olivia recognized Nathan, his injured leg secured in its medical boot, determination etched on his face. When his feet touched the ground, the helicopter pulled away slightly, hovering at a safe distance. Nathan unhooked himself from the harness with practiced movements, suggesting this wasn't his first time being deployed from a helicopter. "Show me," he said without preamble, his eyes intense. Olivia nodded, leading him carefully across the uneven terrain toward the crevice. She'd marked the entrance with her ranger jacket. "It's tight inside," she warned, "and you'll need to be careful with your leg." Nathan nodded grimly, accepting the spare flashlight she offered. Together they entered the narrow passage, Olivia going first to guide him. When they emerged into the small chamber, Olivia stepped aside, allowing Nathan to see everything for himself. His flashlight beam moved slowly across the remnants of his father's last campsite, finally coming to rest on the items Olivia had gathered together: the wallet, the camera, the notebook. He moved forward slowly, kneeling despite his injured leg, and reached for the wallet with trembling hands. Opening it, he stared at his father's license for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "I was 17 when he disappeared," Nathan said quietly, not looking up. "Everyone had theories. He'd fallen. He'd been attacked by an animal. He'd simply decided to leave and start a new life somewhere else." His voice cracked slightly. "I never believed that last one. He wouldn't have left us willingly." Olivia remained silent, understanding that Nathan needed this moment. "He was an incredible photographer," he continued, gently touching the preserved camera. "He taught me everything I know about seeing the world through a lens. The technology in company I built, it started with digital imaging software, inspired by his work." Nathan finally looked up at Olivia, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "All these years I've been looking for him. Every annual hike, every donation to search and rescue organizations, every imaging technology we developed. It was all to find him. And now you have," Olivia said softly. "Yes." Nathan's voice was barely audible. "Thank you for this, for completing the circle." The weight of the moment hung in the small space, the sun finding closure after decades of uncertainty. The ranger who had inadvertently saved not just the man, but also his long-held hope for answers. "The film," Nathan said suddenly, holding up the camera. "It might still be viable. With the right processing techniques, we might be able to see the last images he captured." "I should warn you," Olivia said gently. "This is technically a recovery site now. I'm obligated to report it to the authorities." Nathan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course, but perhaps before that happens." Olivia knew what he was asking. It wasn't strictly by the book, but then again, nothing about. This situation was standard procedure. "The camera and the notebook," she said decisively. "You can take those with you now. I'll report finding the site and the wallet, but I can say the other items were too degraded to recover immediately. It will give you time." Relief flooded Nathan's face. "I won't forget this, Olivia." As they carefully exited the crevice, the weight of their discovery hung between them, a shared secret, a moment of humanity triumphing over protocol. The helicopter still hovered nearby, waiting to retrieve Nathan. "Will you be okay?" Olivia asked as he reattached the harness. Nathan looked at the camera and notebook he now held, 25 years of questions potentially answered in his hands. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "But for the first time in a long time, I think I Might be. As the helicopter lifted him away, Olivia watched until it disappeared behind the mountain ridge. She had broken protocol for him, compromised her professional standards. Yet somehow, standing in the shadow of the mountain that had claimed Thomas Gray and nearly taken his son as well, it felt like the right thing to do. She gathered her equipment and began the hike back to the ranger station, the discovery weighing heavily on her mind. Somewhere in Seattle, Nathan would be examining the last traces of his father's life, finding answers to questions that had defined him for decades, and here in the mountains she called home, Olivia Wright had just crossed a line she couldn't uncross, putting a human connection above the rules she had always followed. The decision would have consequences, both professional and personal, that she couldn't yet imagine. The next morning brought a series of phone calls that Olivia had been expecting. First, her supervisor demanding to know why the discovery of Thomas Gray's belongings had been reported to the sheriff's department 12 hours after the fact. Then the sheriff himself, politely but firmly requesting a detailed statement about the discovery site. By noon, Olivia found herself in the middle of a hastily organized recovery operation, leading a team back to the crevice. "You're saying you found the wallet and equipment yesterday afternoon, but waited until this morning to report it?" Sheriff Harding asked as they hiked up the trail, his tone more curious than accusatory. "I needed to secure the site and ensure I had documented everything properly," Olivia replied, the lie sitting uncomfortably in her stomach. "The light was fading, and I wanted to make sure nothing was disturbed overnight." The sheriff, a weathered man in his 50s who had been in charge when Thomas Gray originally disappeared, seemed to accept this explanation. 25 years, he mused. All this time he was less than 5 miles from the main trail. Makes you wonder how many other mysteries these mountains are hiding. When they reached the crevice, the forensics team from the county took over, carefully documenting and collecting what remained of Thomas Gray's last campsite. Olivia stood back, answering questions when asked, but otherwise keeping her involvement minimal. She had already compromised her professional ethics enough. As the team worked, her satellite phone vibrated in her pocket. Stepping away from the group, she answered quietly, "The film was salvageable," Nathan said without preamble, his voice tight with emotion. "I had it processed at a specialized lab overnight." "What was on it?" Olivia asked, moving further from the recovery team. "The last day of his life," Nathan replied softly. "Sunrise over the mountains, wildlife, landscape shots of incredible beauty. And then," he paused, "the storm rolling in, the rock slide beginning, his desperate search for shelter. The final shots were taken from inside the crevice, documenting his injuries. He knew he wasn't going to make it out." Olivia closed her eyes, visualizing the scene. "I'm so sorry, Nathan." "Don't be. These images are a gift. They show me he fought until the end. He didn't just disappear, he left a record, hoping someone would find it someday." Nathan's voice strengthened, and the notebook contained his final thoughts, letters to my mother and me. He loved us until his last moment. The raw emotion in his voice made Olivia's chest tighten. Despite the professional risk she'd taken, hearing the closure in Nathan's words confirmed she'd made the right choice. "The recovery team is here now," she told him. "They're processing the site." "I understand. I've already contacted them to explain that I took his camera and notebook. I've claimed full responsibility, Olivia. I told them I insisted and that you had no choice." Relief flooded through her. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." His tone was firm. "You risked your career to give me this closure. I won't let you suffer the consequences." Before she could respond, one of the forensics technicians called her name. "I should go," she said quickly. "This isn't over, Olivia." Nathan said, "We need to talk soon." The line went dead as she rejoined the recovery team. They had found what she had feared, human remains in a narrow section at the back of the cave, concealed behind a rockfall that had likely occurred after Thomas Gray had taken shelter. The rest of the day passed in a blur of reports, photographs, and careful documentation. By evening, when the remains and all recoverable items had been transported down the mountain, Olivia was physically and emotionally exhausted. She returned to her cabin as the sun was setting, the golden light filtering through the trees, a stark contrast to the somber mood of the day. Opening the door, she was startled to find a package waiting on her porch. A small, carefully wrapped box with no shipping label, just her name written in elegant handwriting. Inside was a framed photograph, a stunning sunrise over Cascade Mountain, the light breaking through storm clouds in brilliant shafts of gold and amber. It was unmistakably one of Thomas Gray's final photographs, professionally printed and beautifully framed. A note accompanied it. "The first light after the darkest storm. Thank you for bringing both my father and me out of the darkness. N.G." Olivia placed the photograph on her mantle, the beauty of the image at odds with the circumstances of its creation. A gift born from tragedy, connection emerging from loss. Her satellite phone rang again as she was preparing a simple dinner. It was her supervisor, Mark Daniels. "Right, you need to come in tomorrow for a formal meeting," he said without greeting. "The regional director will be there. It's about your handling of the Gray discovery." Olivia's stomach dropped. "I'll be there. What time?" 9 sharp. "And Olivia?" His voice softened slightly. "This doesn't look good. You should prepare yourself. After." He hung up. Olivia sat heavily at her small kitchen table. Despite Nathan's attempt to take responsibility, the timeline of events was clear in the reports. She had found the site, waited hours before reporting it, and allowed evidence to be removed. In the world of National Park Service, these were serious infractions. She had known the risks when she made the choice. Now she would face the consequences. The next morning dawned clear and bright, oblivious to the professional storm Olivia was walking into. She dressed in her formal ranger uniform, polished her badge, and drove to the main administrative office with a growing sense of dread. The meeting was as difficult as she had anticipated. The regional director, a stern woman named Patricia Winters, laid out the violations of protocol in precise, unmerciful detail. Mark sat uncomfortably beside her, avoiding Olivia's gaze. Despite Mr. Gray's statement accepting responsibility, the fact remains that you, Ranger Wright, compromised a recovery site and delayed reporting a significant discovery, Director Winters concluded. "These actions cannot go unaddressed." Olivia nodded, accepting the rebuke. "I understand, ma'am. I made a judgment call based on the human factors involved, but I recognize it was against protocol." "A judgment call?" Director Winters raised an sheepish eyebrow. "You allowed a civilian to remove evidence from a potential crime scene. With respect, ma'am, it wasn't a crime scene. It was a tragic accident that occurred 25 years ago. The camera and notebook were personal effects that provided closure to a son who had been searching for his father for most of his life. The integrity of the recovery site was otherwise maintained." The director's expression didn't soften. "Your dedication to the human element is commendable, Ranger Wright, but this service operates on rules and procedures for a reason." The verdict, when it came, was both expected and devastating. A 2-week suspension without pay and a formal reprimand in her personnel file. Not career-ending, but a significant black mark that would affect any future advancement opportunities. Olivia accepted the punishment without argument. As she walked out of the office, Mark caught up with her in the parking lot. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I think you did the right thing. Not the correct thing according to the rulebook, but the right thing as a human being. Thanks, Mark. That means something. Take the 2 weeks. Rest. This will blow over eventually. Olivia nodded, though they both knew suspensions like this followed a ranger's career like a shadow. As she drove back to her cabin, emotions warred within her, regret at the professional consequences, but not at the decision itself. Nathan Gray had needed that closure, and she had been in a position to provide it. The satellite phone rang as she pulled up to her cabin. Nathan's voice came through, concerned. "I just heard about the suspension. Olivia, I'm so sorry. This is entirely my fault." "No, it's not," she replied firmly. "It was my decision. I knew the risks. Let me help. I can speak to your directors, make a donation to the park. Something—" "Nathan, stop!" Olivia's voice was gentle but firm. "Your money can't fix this, and trying would only make it worse. This is the consequence of my choice, and I accept it." A brief silence followed. "What will you do for 2 weeks?" he finally asked. Olivia looked up at the mountains surrounding her cabin, the peaks still capped with snow, despite the spring warmth in the valley. "I don't know. Hike. Read. Pretend I'm on vacation instead of suspension. Come to Seattle," Nathan said suddenly. "What? Come to Seattle," he repeated more confidently. "I'm holding a memorial service for my father this weekend now that we know what happened to him. It would mean a lot if you were there." Olivia hesitated. Attending a memorial for Thomas Gray made sense. She had found him, after all. But going to Seattle, entering Nathan's world, that felt like crossing yet another line. "I don't know, Nathan. That's your world, your family." "I'm part of this story now, Olivia. You brought my father home, please." There was something in his voice, vulnerability beneath the confidence, that made refusal impossible. "When is it?" she asked finally. "Saturday at 2. I'll send a car for you. Or the helicopter, if you prefer," he added, a hint of humor entering his voice. Despite herself, Olivia smiled. "A car will be fine. I do know how to function in civilization, contrary to what you might think." "I never doubted it for a moment, Forest Guardian." After they disconnected, Olivia sat on her porch steps, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. 2 paths stretched before her, staying safely within the boundaries of her mountain sanctuary, or stepping into Nathan Gray's world of wealth and technology, a world as foreign to her as the wilderness was to him. The suspension had forced her hand. For the next 2 weeks, she was free from ranger duties, free to explore whatever this connection with Nathan might mean. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Inside her cabin, Thomas Gray's sunrise photograph caught the last light of day, seeming to glow from within. The message felt suddenly prophetic, light after darkness, new beginnings after endings. With a deep breath, Olivia made her decision. She would go to Seattle. She would honor Thomas Gray's memory, and perhaps, just perhaps, she would discover what existed beyond the boundaries of the life she had carefully constructed for herself among these ancient trees and mountains. Seattle emerged from the morning fog like a futuristic vision. Glass, towers, reaching toward the clouds, their surfaces reflecting the water of Puget Sound in shimmering patterns of blue and silver. Olivia watched the cityscape grow larger through the window of the sleek black car Nathan had sent for her, feeling increasingly out of place in her simple navy dress and minimal makeup. The driver, professionally courteous, navigated through downtown traffic with practiced ease, eventually turning onto a private drive that wound up one of Seattle's many hills. The gates that greeted them were understated but unmistakably secure, opening silently as the car approached. Nathan's home was not what Olivia had expected. Rather than the ultra-modern glass mansion she had imagined, the house was a thoughtfully restored craftsman, larger than most but harmonious with its wooded surroundings. Natural materials, stone, wood, and copper, aged to a soft green patina, created a structure that seemed to have grown organically from the hillside. The car came to a stop at the front entrance. Before the driver could assist her, the front door opened and Nathan appeared, dressed in a simple but clearly expensive dark suit. Despite the formality of his attire, his smile was warm and genuine as he approached. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I said I would," Olivia replied, suddenly self-conscious about her appearance. She'd spent the morning debating what to wear. Her ranger uniform obviously inappropriate, but her limited civilian wardrobe hardly suited for what would undoubtedly be an upscale memorial service. Nathan seemed to sense her discomfort. "You look perfect," he said quietly, offering his arm. "Thank you for being here. It means more than you know." The interior of the house matched its exterior, tasteful, expensive without being ostentatious, and designed to highlight the spectacular views of the Sound and the Olympic Mountains beyond. Floor-to-ceiling windows in the main living area framed the landscape like a living painting, bringing nature inside in a way that resonated with Olivia despite the luxury surrounding it. "Your home is beautiful," she said honestly. "Not what I expected," Nathan smiled. "What did you expect? Glass and chrome and a helicopter pad on the roof?" "Something like that," she admitted. "This feels more like you." "It was my grandmother's house," he explained, leading her through to a sunroom overlooking a meticulously maintained garden. "When the technology company took off and everyone expected me to build some modern monstrosity, I bought this instead and restored it. It reminds me of where I came from." A handful of staff moved quietly through the house, making final preparations for the memorial service. One approached Nathan with a question about the catering, and he excused himself briefly, leaving Olivia to explore the sunroom. A collection of framed photographs caught her attention, family pictures spanning decades. Nathan as a child with a woman who must be his mother, a teenage Nathan with a camping backpack, and most strikingly, several photographs of Thomas Gray, the resemblance to his son unmistakable despite the years between them. In one particularly poignant image, father and son stood together on what appeared to be a mountain trail, cameras around both their necks, matching expressions of joy on their faces. Thomas Gray had the same intelligent eyes as Nathan, the same smile that transformed his entire face. "That was our last camping trip together," Nathan said, returning to her side. 6 months before he disappeared. I was 16. "You look like him," Olivia observed. "So everyone says." Nathan gazed at the photograph, his expression softening. "He would have liked you, I think." "Why do you say that?" "He valued authenticity above all else. Said you could always tell when someone was pretending to be something they weren't." He turned to look at her directly. "You're one of the most authentic people I've ever met." The compliment caught her off guard, warmth rising to her cheeks. Before she could respond, the doorbell announced the first guests. "I should greet them," Nathan said apologetically. "Make yourself at home. The service will be in the garden in about an hour." As he walked away, Olivia felt suddenly adrift in this unfamiliar setting. The next hour passed in a blur of introductions as the house filled with people, family members, friends and business associates of both Nathan and his late father. She noticed how Nathan changed subtly with different groups, his manner becoming more formal with business contacts, warmer with friends, genuine but guarded with most. Only with her did he seem completely unguarded, seeking her out between greeting guests to make sure she was comfortable, introducing her simply as the ranger who found my father, without elaborating on the circumstances of their meeting. Among the guests was an elegant older woman whom Nathan introduced as his mother, Catherine. Her handshake was firm, her assessment of Olivia swift and thorough. "So you're the forest ranger my son has been talking about," she said, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp. "He tells me you showed exceptional courage and compassion." "I was just doing my job, Mrs. Gray," Olivia replied. "Catherine, please. And from what I understand, you went well beyond your job description." There was no judgment in her voice, just a statement of fact. 25 years we've waited for answers. I'm grateful it was someone like you who found him. The memorial service itself was intimate and moving. Held in the garden where spring flowers were just beginning to bloom, it brought together those who had known Thomas Gray and those who had only known of him through his son. Nathan spoke eloquently about his father's passion for photography, his love of nature, and his influence on Nathan's life and work. "Many of you know that my company, Grayscale Technologies, began with imaging software," he said, his voice steady, despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "What you may not know is that every algorithm, every innovation was inspired by my father's approach to photography. He taught me to see the world differently, to find beauty in contrasts, meaning in composition, stories in single moments captured in time." As he spoke, a series of photographs appeared on a screen behind him, a curated selection of Thomas Gray's work, including several from the recovered film. The final image was the sunrise that now hung in Olivia's cabin, the light breaking through. Storm clouds, in a perfect metaphor for hope amid darkness. "Yesterday, we finally laid my father to rest," Nathan concluded. "Today we celebrate not just his memory, but the closure his discovery has brought. For 25 years, I've been searching. Now, thanks to circumstances I could never have predicted and people I could never have imagined meeting, that search is over. I can finally say goodbye, knowing he died doing what he loved, in the mountains that called to his spirit." His eyes found Olivia's in the small crowd, a look of gratitude passing between them that felt intensely private despite the public setting. After the formal service, the gathering transitioned to a reception. Olivia found herself approached by various guests, curious about her role in the discovery. She kept her explanation simple, focusing on the search rather than the complicated emotions surrounding it. As the afternoon progressed, she noticed Nathan growing increasingly tense despite his polished social manner. It was subtle, a tightness. Around his eyes, a slight stiffness in his posture. But after spending days with him in her cabin during his recovery, she recognized the signs of his discomfort. When she finally found a moment alone with him on the garden terrace, away from the other guests, she asked directly, "Are you okay?" Nathan's practiced smile faltered. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's seen you with a broken leg and a concussion," she replied lightly. He laughed softly, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "All these people, these conversations. It feels like performance art sometimes. Necessary but exhausting." "So step away for a few minutes," Olivia suggested. "I'm pretty sure you own the place. You can disappear if you want to." Nathan looked at her curiously, as if the idea had never occurred to him. "Would you come with me?" Without waiting for her answer, he gently took her elbow, guiding her through a side door and along a path that led away from the main garden to a smaller, more secluded area. Here a simple wooden bench overlooked the sound, the view framed by ancient cedar trees. "My thinking spot," he explained as they sat. "When the business demands and social obligations get too loud, I come here to remember what matters." "It's beautiful," Olivia said, appreciating how the natural setting created a pocket of tranquility within the city. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching an eagle soar over the water, the distant mountains a hazy blue. "On the horizon, thank you for coming today," Nathan said finally. "Having you here, someone who understands both what was lost and what was found, it means everything." "I'm glad I could be here," Olivia replied honestly. She hesitated, then added, "Though I feel a bit like I've stepped into another dimension. Your world is a lot to take in." Nathan smiled, a trace of sadness in his eyes. "It's not really. My world, not the way your mountains are yours. It's just where I ended up. You seem good at it, though, she observed. The business, the wealth, the social navigation. I'm good at playing the part, he corrected. But that's all it is sometimes. A part I play because it's expected. The real me is the guy who still hikes up that mountain every year looking for his dad. The guy who feels more at peace in a forest than in a boardroom. The vulnerability in his admission touched something deep inside Olivia. Despite their different circumstances, she recognized the feeling of living partially outside one's true self. We should probably get back, Nathan said reluctantly, glancing at his watch. People will be wondering where the host disappeared to. As they stood to return to the reception, he paused, turning to face her directly. Olivia, would you consider staying in Seattle for a few days? I'd like to show you my city, away from all— He gestured vaguely toward the house. This, the invitation hung between them, weighted with implications neither was quite ready to voice. Olivia thought of her empty cabin, her suspended duties, the 2 weeks stretching ahead with nothing but her own thoughts for company. I'd like that, she said simply. Nathan's smile, genuine, unguarded, reaching all the way to his eyes, was like the sunrise in his father's photograph, breaking through clouds of formality and social performance. As they returned to the reception, Olivia felt the curious glances from some of the guests, the speculative looks from Nathan's mother, the subtle shift in how people regarded her now, that Nathan had singled her out for attention. She was no longer just the ranger who had made a discovery. She was someone of interest, a potential factor in Nathan Gray's life. It was uncomfortable, this sudden visibility, this sense of being assessed and categorized by strangers. Yet as Nathan introduced her to a childhood friend, his hand resting lightly, briefly at the small of her back, she found herself willing to endure the scrutiny. For the first time since arriving in Seattle, Olivia felt not just out of place, but on the edge of something new and unexplored, a territory as mysterious and potentially treacherous as any mountain trail, but equally full of discovery. Morning light filtered through unfamiliar curtains, waking Olivia in the guest suite of Nathan's home. For a moment, she felt disoriented, the soft bed and luxurious linens a stark contrast to her simple cabin furnishings. The events of the previous day came back to her gradually. The memorial service, the private moment in Nathan's garden sanctuary, her decision to stay in Seattle for a few days. She rose and moved to the window. The view was spectacular. Puget Sound stretched out before her, the water glittering in the early sun, ferries making their slow journeys between islands. In the distance, the Olympic Mountains rose in a jagged line against the sky, a reminder of her own beloved Cascades. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. When she opened it, she found not Nathan but a woman in her 50s with a warm smile and a breakfast tray. "Good morning, Miss Wright. I'm Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper. Mr. Gray asked me to bring you breakfast and let you know he's in his study whenever you're ready to join him." "No rush," Olivia thanked her, slightly uncomfortable with being served, but appreciating the thoughtfulness. The breakfast was simple but perfect. Fresh fruit, yogurt, artisan bread with local honey, and coffee that smelled heavenly. After eating and changing into the one casual outfit she'd packed, jeans and a forest green sweater, Olivia ventured out of the guest suite to find Nathan. The house was quiet, most of yesterday's guests and staff long gone. She found Nathan's study after a wrong turn or two, knocking lightly on the half-open door. "Come in," he called. The study revealed yet another facet of Nathan Gray. Unlike the formal public areas of the house, this space was deeply personal, walls lined with books, a large wooden desk covered with papers and photography equipment, and most surprisingly, large-format photographs of wilderness landscapes that could have been taken in her own corner of the Cascades. Nathan sat at the desk, dressed casually in a Henley and jeans, looking more like the injured hiker she'd rescued than the polished tech CEO of yesterday's memorial service. He was examining what appeared to be the restored camera found in his father's belongings. "You found me," he said, looking up with a smile. "Sleep well?" "Better than I expected," Olivia admitted, "though it's a far cry from my cabin." "Too comfortable?" There was genuine curiosity in his voice. "Different comfortable," she clarified, gesturing to the photographs on his walls. "I didn't expect those." Nathan followed her gaze. "My own work, actually. Photography has always been my escape. Another thing I inherited from my father." "They're beautiful," Olivia said sincerely, stepping closer to examine one. A sunrise, shot of alpine meadows that could have been taken in her own patrol area. "You have a good eye." High praise from someone who lives in that beauty every day. Nathan set down the camera he'd been examining. "I was thinking we could avoid the typical tourist attractions today, unless you really want to see the space." "Needle?" Olivia laughed. "I think I can live without it." "Good," Nathan said, standing, "because I have something else in mind if you're game." An hour later, they were aboard a private boat, skimming across Puget Sound toward one of the less developed islands. Nathan piloted the vessel himself, clearly comfortable on the water. Olivia stood beside him in the wheelhouse, enjoying the salt spray and the sensation of speed across the open water. "I didn't know you sailed," she commented as he expertly navigated around a larger vessel. "Another inheritance from my father," Nathan replied. "He believed being on the water was as essential as being in the mountains, different elements that required the same respect." They reached a small, sheltered cove on the far side of the island, dropping anchor in crystalline waters. Nathan guided the small tender to shore, where a pristine beach gave way to dense evergreen forest. "Welcome to Osprey Island," he said, as they pulled the tender onto the sand, one of the last undeveloped islands in the Sound. No ferries, no regular tours, just nature. "It's beautiful," Olivia said, taking in the untouched shoreline. "Private property?" Nathan nodded. "My father bought it in the 80s when development started threatening the other islands. He never built on it, just protected it. After he disappeared, my mother wanted to sell it, but I couldn't let it go." He led her from the beach into the forest along a barely visible trail. The trees here were old growth, massive trunks reaching skyward, creating a cathedral-like canopy that filtered sunlight into dappled patterns on the moss-covered ground. "My father used to bring me here when I needed perspective," Nathan explained, as they walked. "When school was too stressful, or when I was struggling with something, he'd say, 'These trees were here long before your problems, and they'll be here long after.'" Olivia smiled, feeling unexpectedly at home among these ancient sentinels. "Sounds like ranger wisdom. We tell visitors something similar when they get too caught up in cell phones and schedules." The trail eventually opened into a small clearing, with a spectacular view of the surrounding waters and distant mainland. A simple wooden bench, weathered but solid, faced the view. "My father built this," Nathan said, running his hand along the bench's arm. "We'd sit here for hours sometimes, not talking, just watching the water and the birds." Olivia sat beside him, understanding the significance of this place, the privilege of being brought here. "Thank you for showing me this. I wanted you to see that there are parts of my world that might not be so foreign to you," Nathan replied, his voice softening. "That beneath the business meetings and technology and wealth, there's still that kid who found peace in nature with his dad." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching an osprey circle over the water before diving precisely to catch a fish. The connection between them deepened in that quiet moment, a shared appreciation for the natural world that transcended their different lives. "Tell me about Grayscale Technologies," Olivia said eventually. "What does your company actually do?" Nathan seemed surprised by the question, but pleased. We started with imaging software, programs that could enhance and restore damaged photographs. That grew into more advanced applications, environmental monitoring systems, conservation technology. Our latest project is actually something that might interest you. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small, unobtrusive device. This is a prototype wildlife tracker. It's solar-powered, completely weatherproof, and can transmit data even from the most remote locations without requiring cellular coverage. We're hoping it will revolutionize how rangers and conservation teams monitor endangered species. Olivia took the device, examining it with interest. No more bulky radio collars? Exactly. Less invasive, longer lasting, more data. There was genuine enthusiasm in his voice, the businessman giving way to the innovator. We're partnering with 3 national parks for beta testing. I was actually planning to approach Cascade about joining the program. Before you fell off a mountain and got personally involved with one of their rangers, Olivia teased. Nathan laughed. Well, it certainly created a unique introduction, but the technology stands on its own merits. It would make a huge difference, Olivia admitted, returning the device. Our current tracking systems are outdated and unreliable in the more remote areas. See, not everything about the technology world is at odds with your conservation values. Nathan placed the tracker carefully back in his pack. Some of us are trying to build bridges between those worlds. The day continued with exploration of the island, tide pools teeming with life, a hidden waterfall tumbling into a clear pool, old-growth trees that had survived centuries of storms. Despite the luxurious boat that had brought them here, the experience itself was one Olivia found deeply familiar and comforting, simply being in nature with someone who appreciated it as much as she did. They returned to the mainland as sunset painted the sky in spectacular hues of orange and pink. After docking at a private marina, Nathan drove them to a small, unassuming restaurant overlooking the water. "Best seafood in Seattle," he promised as they entered, "and no one will bother us here." The restaurant owner greeted Nathan like an old friend rather than a celebrity client, showing them to a corner table with a perfect view of the sunset over the Sound. Unlike the upscale venues Olivia had expected, this place was casual and authentic, the kind of local establishment that existed on quality rather than pretension. Over fresh oysters and perfectly prepared salmon, their conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from environmental policy to favorite books. Olivia found herself relaxing completely for the first time since arriving in Seattle, the unease of being in Nathan's world fading in the face of genuine connection. "Can I ask you something personal?" Nathan said, as they lingered over dessert, the restaurant now nearly empty as evening deepened. "You can ask," Olivia replied cautiously. "Why the isolation? You're brilliant, educated, capable of doing anything you wanted. What made you choose a life so removed from everything?" The question wasn't judgmental, just curious, but Olivia took a moment to gather her thoughts before answering. "After my grandfather died, I felt lost. He was the one person who truly understood me, who never expected me to be anyone other than who I was. The mountains were where we connected, where I felt most like myself." She traced a pattern on the tablecloth, memories surfacing. "In the city, there were always expectations. My parents' medical legacy, societal pressures, constant comparison. In the wilderness, the only expectation is authenticity. Nature doesn't care about your resume, or your connections, or your appearance. It only cares if you respect its power and understand its rhythms." Nathan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I understand that more than you might think. In my world, authenticity is the rarest commodity. Everyone wants something, everyone has an agenda. The higher you rise, the fewer people treat you like a human being rather than an opportunity. Is that why you maintain that little sanctuary? In your garden, your own piece of wilderness amid the chaos?" Exactly. Nathan smiled, pleased by her perception. We all need spaces where we can be fully ourselves, without performance or pretense. As they drove back to his house, night having fully fallen over the city, Olivia felt a sense of discovery, not just of Seattle or Nathan's world, but of unexpected common ground between them. Despite their vastly different lives, they shared core values, similar wounds, parallel searches for authenticity in worlds that often demanded conformity. At the house, Nathan walked her to the guest suite door, lingering in a moment that felt weighted with unspoken possibilities. "Thank you for today," Olivia said sincerely, "for showing me your father's island. That can't have been easy after the memorial." "It wasn't," Nathan admitted. "I haven't been back there since before he was found, but sharing it with you felt right, like completing a circle somehow." Their eyes held for a long moment, the connection between them palpable in the quiet hallway. "Good night, Olivia," Nathan said finally, his voice soft. "Good night, Nathan." As she closed the door behind her, Olivia leaned against it, processing. The day's revelations, the bridge between their worlds, seemed less impossible now, the gap less insurmountable. In showing her Osprey Island, Nathan had revealed not just a physical place, but a shared spiritual territory, a love of wild places, a search for meaning beyond material success, a desire for genuine connection in worlds that often prioritized appearances over substance. Outside her window, Seattle glittered with countless lights, beautiful in its own way, so different from her starlit mountain nights, yet somehow less foreign than it had seemed yesterday. Perhaps, Olivia thought as she gazed at the illuminated cityscape, the boundaries we draw between different lives are more permeable than we imagine. The next 3 days passed in a blur of new experiences as Nathan showed Olivia a side of Seattle few tourists, and even fewer billionaires, ever witnessed. Rather than the expected luxury restaurants and exclusive clubs, he took her to hidden neighborhood gems, local art installations, and community gardens tucked between skyscrapers. They explored the underground city, kayaked along the shoreline at dawn, and hiked through urban parks where Nathan knew every trail. He introduced her to scientists working on conservation projects funded by his company, artists whose environmental installations challenged conventional thinking, and community leaders working to preserve green spaces within the urban landscape. Through it all, Olivia found herself increasingly drawn to the complexity of Nathan Gray, a man who moved effortlessly between worlds, who could discuss corporate strategy one moment and identify native plant species the next. The more time they spent together, the more the initial image of the wealthy tech CEO blurred, revealing someone far more nuanced. On her 4th morning in Seattle, Olivia woke early, a habit from years of ranger schedules. Rather than waiting for breakfast to be brought, she ventured to the kitchen, hoping to find coffee. Instead, she found Catherine Gray sitting at the island counter, reading the newspaper over a steaming cup. "Good morning," Catherine said, not seeming surprised by Olivia's appearance. "Coffee's fresh, help yourself." Olivia thanked her, somewhat uncomfortable to be caught in her casual clothes by Nathan's elegant mother. She poured herself a cup and hesitated, unsure whether to retreat or stay. "Sit," Catherine said, gesturing to a stool beside her. "Nathan won't be up for at least another hour. He was on a late call with Tokyo last night." Olivia sat, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Morning light streamed through the kitchen windows, illuminating Catherine's features, the same intelligent eyes as her son, though set in a face marked by both privilege and pain. "You're not what I expected," Catherine said after a moment. "Oh?" Olivia wasn't sure how to respond. When Nathan said he'd invited the park ranger who found Thomas to stay, I thought perhaps it was just courtesy, gratitude for closure after all these years. Catherine studied her over the rim of her coffee cup. "But it's more than that, isn't it?" The directness of the question caught Olivia off guard. "We've become friends," she said carefully. Catherine's expression softened slightly. "Nathan doesn't have many real friends, people who see him, not his position or his wealth." She set down her cup. "I've watched him these past few days. He's different with you, more like himself." "I wouldn't know the difference," Olivia admitted. "I only met him after finding him injured on the mountain." "Exactly," Catherine nodded. "You met him at his most vulnerable, stripped of all the trappings that usually define him to others. And that's rare in his world, our world." Olivia considered this, realizing the truth in Catherine's observation. Her first impression of Nathan had been formed when he was injured, confused, dependent on her care, a context that stripped away the usual power dynamics that would have existed between them. "He seems happy showing you Seattle," Catherine continued. "I haven't seen him this animated in years, not since before Thomas disappeared." "He's been very kind," Olivia said, feeling increasingly out of her depth in this conversation. Catherine's gaze became more penetrating. "He's also the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company with responsibilities to thousands of employees and shareholders. His life is here, in boardrooms and research labs and investment meetings." She paused. "Your suspension ends in a week, doesn't it?" The question confirmed what Olivia had suspected. Catherine Gray had thoroughly researched her. "Yes. And then you returned to your mountains, your ranger duties, your solitary cabin." It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact, delivered without judgment but with clear implication. The temporary nature of their connection, the fundamental incompatibility of their lives, all laid bare in Catherine's measured tone. "That's my job, my home," Olivia replied simply. Catherine nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer. "I don't mean to overstep. It's just that Nathan has experienced enough loss in his life. I wouldn't want to see him hurt again." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Chen, who began preparing breakfast. Catherine excused herself gracefully, leaving Olivia alone with her thoughts and half-finished coffee. The exchange left Olivia unsettled. Catherine hadn't been hostile. In fact, she'd been surprisingly warm in her own reserved way. But her message had been clear. Whatever was developing between Nathan and Olivia faced significant practical obstacles. Later that morning, Nathan suggested they visit Grayscale Technologies headquarters. "I thought you might like to see where all our conservation technology is developed," he said. "Unless you'd rather do something else?" "No, I'd like to see it," Olivia replied, curious about this central part of his life. The Grayscale building was a stunning blend of modern architecture and sustainable design. Solar panels integrated into glass walls, a living roof visible from the street, rainwater collection systems feeding interior gardens. As they entered, Olivia noticed how employees responded to Nathan, with respect but not fear, many greeting him by name with genuine warmth. "Most of them have been with me since the early days," Nathan explained as he led her through the main workspace, an open concept area filled with developers and designers. "I believe in building technology that matters and that attracts people who care about more than just a paycheck." The tour continued through research labs where prototypes were being tested, meeting rooms where conservation projects were mapped, on digital displays, and finally to Nathan's office, a corner space with views of both the mountains and the Sound. Unlike the corporate showpiece Olivia had expected, Nathan's workspace was practical and surprisingly personal. Conservation maps shared wall space with his own nature photographs. A workbench held camera equipment and half-assembled prototypes. And most surprisingly, a well-worn hiking backpack and boots stood ready in one corner. "For when the office becomes too much," he explained, following her gaze to the gear. "Sometimes I need to escape to the mountains or the water for a few hours to clear my head." As the day progressed, Olivia witnessed firsthand the demands on Nathan's time. Calls from international partners, meetings with research teams, decisions That affected thousands of employees and millions in conservation funding. Yet through it all, he maintained a centered calm, occasionally catching her eye across a room with a private smile that seemed to say, "This is my world, but you're part of it now." That evening, Nathan surprised her with dinner on the rooftop garden of the Grayscale building, a space unknown even to most employees, accessible only by a private elevator from his office. Solar-powered lights illuminated raised beds of vegetables and herbs, a small greenhouse, and a simple table set for two overlooking the city and the mountains beyond. "You built a garden on your corporate headquarters?" Olivia asked, amazed by the lush greenery thriving 17 stories above the busy streets. "I needed somewhere to breathe," Nathan explained, pouring wine into 2 glasses. "Somewhere I could look at both the city and the mountains and remember what matters." As they enjoyed a meal, Nathan had prepared himself from vegetables grown in the garden. Their conversation turned to the future, both immediate and distant. "Your suspension ends in 5 days, Nathan said, his tone carefully neutral. "Yes." Olivia met his gaze across the table. "I'll be heading back to the mountains, back to my duties. And I'll be here, running Grayscale, developing technologies that might someday help rangers like you protect those mountains." A gentle smile softened his features. "It seems we're at a crossroads." Olivia nodded, the word capturing perfectly the sense of decision that had been building between them. "Catherine made that quite clear this morning." Nathan laughed softly. "My mother never was one for subtlety, but she's not wrong about the practical challenges." He reached across the table, taking Olivia's hand in his. "What she doesn't understand is that some connections are worth figuring out, even when the path isn't clear." "Is that what this is?" Olivia asked quietly. "A connection worth figuring out?" "I think you know it is." Nathan's voice was steady, his eyes never leaving hers. "The question is whether we're both willing to build a bridge between our worlds." The moment stretched between them, weighted with possibility. Then Olivia smiled, a decision crystallizing in her mind with unexpected clarity. "I've been thinking a lot about bridges today," she said, "about how they don't eliminate the distance between 2 places. They just make it possible to travel between them, to belong to both sides." Nathan's expression brightened with understanding. "You're saying we don't have to choose one world over the other?" "Maybe not," Olivia agreed. "Your company is doing work that matters to me as a ranger. My mountains are places you need to sustain you as a person. Perhaps instead of seeing our lives as incompatible, we could see them as complementary." "It won't be simple," Nathan cautioned, though hope was evident in his voice. "My schedule is demanding, unpredictable, and I disappear into the wilderness for days at a time," Olivia countered. "But I'm starting to think that might actually be healthy, having separate spaces to be fully ourselves, then coming together to share what we've learned, what we've seen." The idea hung between them, not a compromise, where both sacrificed essential parts of themselves, but a new model where both worlds remained intact, connected by the bridge they would build together. "There's actually something I've been considering," Nathan said, his tone thoughtful. "Grayscale is opening a research center focused on wilderness conservation technology. One potential location is just outside Cascade National Park." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Convenient. Strategic," Nathan corrected with a smile. "It would allow me to split my time between Seattle and the mountains. 3 days here, 4 days there, perhaps. Technology makes remote work increasingly viable, even for CEOs." "And what would I do while you're in Seattle?" Olivia asked, testing the solidity of this emerging plan. "Whatever you wish. Continue your ranger work which you love. Or," he hesitated briefly, "Grayscale will need experienced field consultants for the new wildlife tracking system, someone who understands both the technology and the wilderness it's designed to protect." The offer wasn't charity or accommodation. It was recognition of her unique skill set, her value beyond their personal connection. Whether she accepted it or not, the fact that he had considered her professional fulfillment touched her deeply. This could work, she said softly, the possibility becoming more real with each passing moment. Not perfectly, not without challenges, but genuinely work. Like any good bridge, it will need constant maintenance, Nathan agreed. But I think we're both capable of that kind of commitment. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Olivia felt the boundaries between her world and Nathan's beginning to blur, not erasing either, but creating something new between them, a shared territory of possibility. 6 months later, Olivia stood on the porch of her cabin, watching a familiar Range Rover navigate the forest road. Her suspension had ended long ago, her position as senior ranger secure once more, though now supplemented by consultation. Work with Grayscale's conservation team 3 days a week. Nathan emerged from the vehicle, looking more at home in hiking boots and casual clothes than he ever had in business attire. He carried a small duffel bag and what appeared to be camera equipment, ready for the weekend they had planned exploring the high country trails. As he approached, his face lit with the genuine smile she had come to treasure, the expression of a man fully present, neither the tech CEO nor the wounded son, but simply Nathan, his true self, no longer hidden behind wealth or position. "Welcome back," she said, meeting him halfway down the path. "Good to be home," he replied, the word home holding new meaning for both of them, no longer a single place but a shared state of being, encompassing both her wilderness cabin and his Seattle house, the mountains and the city, solitude and connection. Inside the cabin, Thomas Gray's sunrise photograph still held pride of place on the mantel, the light breaking through storm clouds, a fitting metaphor for the journey that had brought them here. From a rescue in a mountain storm to a life built across 2 worlds. On the table beside it stood a newer photograph, Nathan and Olivia on Osprey Island, the undeveloped sanctuary now formally protected as part of a Grayscale-funded conservation trust. In the image, they stood together on the wooden bench his father had built, the sea and mountains spread before them, their expressions reflecting not just happiness, but a sense of rightness, of pieces falling into place with elegant simplicity. There, bridge between worlds wasn't perfect. It required careful planning, frequent adjustment, occasional compromise. But with each crossing, the journey became more natural, the distance less daunting. Nathan had found in Olivia someone who saw him clearly, without expectation or agenda. She had found in him someone who understood her need for wilderness, while offering connection to a broader world of possibility. As they prepared for their weekend hike, gathering supplies and reviewing maps, Nathan paused, catching Olivia in a rare moment of reflection. "Having second thoughts about our arrangement?" he asked, only half joking. Olivia smiled, shaking her head, "Just thinking about how different this is from what I imagined for my life. A billionaire tech CEO in my cabin, conservation technology, projects on my schedule, weekends in Seattle. Regrets?" There was a trace of vulnerability in the question. "Not one," she replied without hesitation. "It turns out some rescues go both ways." Nathan nodded, understanding her meaning perfectly. She had saved him on that stormy mountainside, but he had also rescued her from isolation that had begun to harden into loneliness, from purpose without connection, from a life half-lived. As they set out on the trail together, the mountains rising before them against a perfect blue sky, Olivia reflected on the strange, winding path that had led them here. A simple act of duty, a ranger rescuing an injured hiker, had opened a door neither could have anticipated, leading not to a choice between worlds, but to a life that embraced both. The kind-hearted forest ranger had indeed rescued a billionaire, at the base of a mountain, unaware of how he would change her life. But the greater truth, the one no headline could capture, was how they had found in each other not just love, but completion, the missing pieces of themselves that made both their worlds richer, fuller, more meaningful than either had been alone. The mountain air was crisp with promise as they hiked higher, following the trail that would take them to the alpine meadows above. Nathan, with his camera ready to capture the beauty, Olivia with her ranger's knowledge guiding their way, both with hearts open to whatever lay beyond the next ridge. Two worlds, one path, and a view worth every step of the journey. Up next,